Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk to you about the changes in the space ecosystem and why we're actually coming. So earlier you would have heard anything to do with space. What would we have heard first? Who's doing space-related activity in India? ISRO. If you say anywhere across the world now, different countries, let's say the US, you would say NASA. Okay. Some defense-related activity, what would you talk about? DRDO, right? Something like that, right? Now what is happening, as Sir mentioned, a lot of the ecosystem is shifting to private, right? It's not necessary that only ISRO, NASA and all of these agencies are building defense products or building space-related products, right? So the ecosystem is changing and it is becoming more accessible for the students as well, right? Be it university students, school students, researchers, all of us are able to contribute something for space, correct? And what is driving this change is a few different things. So one, talking about what it costs to build a satellite, right? So now earlier when we talk about building a satellite, when ISRO was building a satellite or when NASA was building a satellite, we were talking in multiples of crores, in multiples of tens of crores, okay, when it came to building a satellite. And the size of the satellite also was massive, okay? You had satellites that were the size of trucks. Okay, you see the bus that you have over here, the size of the bus also there's a satellite. Okay, that is the kind of satellites that were being built by international, like national space agencies, that is government-owned bodies. Okay, now the satellites that we're building can fit on the palm of your hand. Okay, and they have sufficient communication capability to be able to talk to the Earth, that is basically to send signals to the Earth and send signals back as well. Now, when it comes to building a small satellite, a facility can be set up even in a school to be able to do it, right? So you can have a small lab in the school where you can build a satellite, right? Because you don't need the logistics that are required to transport an entire bus in and out of a lab, correct? So if you've seen some ISRO facilities or if you've seen some videos of launch, you see how the rocket moves out of one massive chamber. There's big doors that open and then something moves out of there. Yeah, that is not required now. Okay, we can build a small satellite. Okay, so this change in trend is called miniaturization of satellites, right? So we're seeing satellites in the scale of picosatellites, nanosatellites and microsatellites. Okay, microsatellites is any satellite that can range between 10 to 100 kgs. We have nanosatellites that are 1 to 10 kgs and picosatellites that are under 1 kg. Okay, so these satellites, nanosatellite and below, that is pico and nanosatellites, can be built over here. Okay. Now, what is also driving this change? Of course, so Moore's law states that every year there's going to be a halving of a certain period. There's going to be a halving of the size of electronics. That is, what used to be a computer that would fit inside the size of a room is now on the palm of your hand. That is your mobile phone. Right? You have more compute power on your mobile phone than we had a couple of years ago in a computer that would fit inside a room. Right? So because of this, because of the miniaturization in your ICs, in your electronics itself, we are able to compact this system and build it inside a small volume. Right? Also, the cost of the systems are coming down, significantly coming down, because the size is also reducing. Mass production is increasing. So when you mass produce electronics become cheaper, right? So you're able to reduce the cost, you're able to reduce the size, it becomes a smaller satellite, and in turn, when things become smaller, it costs lesser to launch it into space. So when you want to launch something to space using a rocket, what is required? If I have to launch a bus to space, what will I require? A big rocket, right? If I have to launch something like a mobile to space, one small rocket is enough, correct? Although we're still using the same size of the rocket, the amount of weight that it occupies is lesser. That means instead of launching one satellite, you can launch 10. Instead of one, you can launch 10 or more. One big satellite along with a few small payloads can be launched into space, right? That way, the cost of one rocket is being distributed into 10 satellites. Okay, so each institution or each college that is trying to launch this satellite has to pay 1/10 of the cost, or much lesser as well. Okay, so launch cost is reduced, cost of building the satellite is reduced. Okay, one more thing has come down, that is, when you're trying to launch a satellite to space, how big is space now? If I have to give you if someone has to tell me how big is space, how far from the Earth, if you say it is called space, is there a limit? No, space is infinite, right? So of course, if you want to launch something farther away, you're going to need more fuel. You cannot launch a satellite as far as you want to launch it. There's a certain limit to where you can launch a satellite for it to be able to communicate with the Earth. So there are most of the times, any kind of your dish TV and all that works off of a satellite that is in the geostationary orbit. Geostationary orbit from the Earth's surface, that is from our surface, it is 36,000 kilometers above. Okay. we have newer orbits that are coming up. These are not particularly new orbits, but rather satellites are being launched into orbits called medium Earth orbits, low Earth orbits, and so on. Okay. So low Earth orbit is where we are launching our satellites now. All our small satellites go into low Earth orbit. Okay. Low Earth orbit in comparison to geostationary. Geostationary is 36,000 kilometers. Low Earth orbit ranges between 350 kilometers to 2,000 kilometers. So the closer the satellite, the lesser power required to communicate with it. Right? And as I mentioned again, 36,000 kilometers, you have to spend that much fuel to go. 500 kilometers, so much lesser fuel. Right? So cost of fuel has come down. Okay, the distance has come down. Amount of power that is required to communicate with the Earth has come down, because if it's 36,000 kilometers, the amount of power that is required to communicate with the Earth is significant. You have to pump a lot of power. Only then you can receive the signal. When it's closer, lesser power is possible. It's like a bulb, right? You take a bulb and you have a very bright bulb, you can see it from a kilometer away. If I only have like a small 10 watt LED, you'll be able to see it in the end of the room, maybe till the next room, that's all, right? So it's like that. Bigger satellite farther away, more power, closer satellite, lesser power. So all of these trends that we're seeing, the smaller satellites, lower distance from the Earth, miniaturization of electronics, upcoming launch vehicles. Now we had, what are the two major launch vehicles that we have from ISRO? One that launches to the moon. What is that launch vehicle? GSLV. Okay. And second, the one that launches satellites to low Earth orbit, PSLV. Okay. Now we have an SSLV also, small satellite launch vehicle. Okay. This is for a much lower orbit. It can also do same orbits as PSLV, but it has lower payload mass. That means the entire cost of the rocket comes down. Okay, and it has been made in such a way that you can continuously cycle the rocket. That means you can have a launch every 3 days. That is the plan, right? So being able to launch one rocket every 3 days means multiple launches over and over again. So in case of a scenario where you require to launch a large number of satellites, you have the capability now. So you're mass producing your rockets, right? So launch cost is of course going to come down. So these trends are what are shaping the space ecosystem, and that is why we as students, okay, be it from school or college, researchers, whatever it is, and even private industry, we are able to contribute, okay, because it's become more accessible, right? So yeah, that's the trend that we're seeing, and I'd like to encourage all of you to start participating in this, because if you look at the space ecosystem in India compared to the rest of the world, you see USA, Russia, at least from the student side, they are far ahead. They have close to 3,000 nanosatellites being launched from the US. We have India approx about 1,300 that has been launched by Russia. Okay. In that scale, basically in the satellite statistics, we are falling a little low. Okay, so it's up to the students now to step up and start, competing with the rest of the countries, so that we can grow as a superpower, right? So that's all I'd like to share for today. Thank you.
ini sarvadesha kalvi samanyargalukku Kalvi Group of Schools